From that corner in the Northeast, land of reverence and colonialism, folks, welcome to Dark Hour Paranormal. I am your host, Michael Ruder, and tonight I have a very fantastic guest joining us to talk about our beloved field of the paranormal. Now, of course, we have covered this subject extensively, not only on the show, but within our own personal endeavors. But it's one of those subjects that, again, within its intangibility, we just certainly have nothing left but to sit back and pause some days and say, you know what, we still can't explain what we and many others are experiencing every day. Now, one of the curious aspects of the paranormal is that it seems to be fleeting in the respect that you're either in the right place at the right time with the right people, the right mindset, the right pair of shoes on, whatever the case may be. Okay, and there's actually something to that. It all seems to be somewhat contrived in respect to synchronicity. And yet we are told, and some of us experience, the paranormal world around us every single day. So what does that mean for us, especially those who are unconscious of this type of activity? Well, this is one of the topics that I'd like to discuss with Charles Rosenay tonight, my guest, who has a very extensive history when it comes to paranormal investigation, on top of being an acclaimed and celebrated author, accomplished in many of works he has provided within his own investigational work, which of course leads me to the fact that he is a paranormal investigator, as you may have imagined. But in addition, he's also the organizer of some of the biggest events that happen in the Northeast regarding the investigations that follow. In fact, he's responsible, along with his partner, Nick Grossman, for the ParaCon that happens in Connecticut, as well as the Salem ParaCon that happens up here in Massachusetts. And those of you who are from the state know how big of a deal that is, especially for us up in this corner of the Northeast. Now, folks, I'm going to let Charles speak a bit for himself, and we are going to have a fantastic show tonight. Again, this is one of those subjects we have explored at length, but there is always something more to discuss within our own experiences, within the folds, that perhaps is something we never even imagined until it's expressed as much. Folks, I'd love to introduce to you a very good friend of mine, Charles F. Rosenay. Charles, thank you so much for joining the show with us tonight. I know you're a very busy guy when it comes to the endeavors that you put together. How you doing, mate?
I'm doing great, and thank you for the great intro. It was really a nice setup to what we're going to be talking about, and we may have a surprise. Nick Grossman might be joining us at some point. He's got the link, so fingers crossed. You might have the shaman and the showman.
Hey, we love that, and of course, as you mentioned, there's a balance within your outfit as a result of that, and I think that as one element is very unique about what you guys do. Now, before we get into some of the core dynamics of what your outfit is about and what you explore, there always has to be some sort of origin point for people's interest in this sort of thing. So many times when we talk to people, paranormal activity or the spirit world, if you will, reveals itself to them in a very young age, or there's a very defining experience that they go through that either makes them question and then explore or outright believe that we are not alone. Charles, at what point in your life did you feel that you weren't alone and that there was something more to explore on perhaps the experiential level and intellectual level when it comes to the field of the paranormal?
So, Michael, I'm very different in that I started as a horror guy, and I sort of back-ended into the whole paranormal world in that things happened to me that I never thought of in terms of the paranormal. I thought, okay, these are unexplained phenomena. I saw an apparition in college, and it was mind-blowing to me, but brought my parents because I couldn't believe what I saw. They saw it too, brought friends, and it was like a repeated thing while I was at college. And I forgot about it. I thought, okay, that was, something that happened that and then I met a gentleman by the name of Nick Grossman. And the prelude to all this is that I'm in the promotional field. As you mentioned, I've written some books and I did acting in horror movies and all that. But as a horror guy, I produced Dracula tours to Transylvania. I did ghost tours to England. the Transylvania tour is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. We actually, combine the fiction of Dracula, the legend of, the Count, with the truth, the history, the legacy of Vlad Tepes, Vlad the Impaler. We combine the two and make just the most unbelievable trip for people who want to go on a vampire vacation. And that begot the ghost tours. We started doing ghost tours to Europe, and we did ghost tours. When I say we, and myself and some friends, to England, Scotland, Ireland, Cuba, Israel, Romania, Hungary, Eastern Europe, Prague, Germany, Frankenstein's Castle. We were doing all these great promotions, never thinking that on these, hey, I have a obligation to the people who go on these tours who are seeking, paranormal proof or evidence or want to do investigations. To me, it was purely entertainment. Everything came in the roof of entertainment. And what happened is my partner now and my best friend, Nick Grossman, came to visit me at a haunted house that I was running. And he comes in and he's in line with people, and he says, "Yo, dude, this place is haunted." And I go, "Well, it should be. I've done a great job, making it that way to scare the pants off people." He goes, "No, really, seriously, it's haunted. It really is." And I'm like, "Ooh, okay, sure, whatever." Now, mind you, my mind is the furthest thing from true scares through paranormal apparitions, the other side. My brain is in just animatronics and actors jumping out and doing, your typical horror scares. Well, he was very persistent. He stayed till the end of the night. He said, "I need to talk to you. We got to do on some shows. We got to do stuff." All right, I'm open to whatever you have to say. We did an event at this haunted attraction, and he performed a scrying session for 50 people. At this event, mind you, everyone who went had experiences that were just mind-blowing to me. Some people saw dead relatives come out in mirrors to them. Others were seeing themselves disappear while the other guests remained. One guy saw all the guests disappear and he remained. Other people saw levitation, a lot of things. But anyway, I'm convinced that he's the real deal here. He's proven to me that there's something beyond, somebody just saying I can do something and actually doing it. We started doing trips. We started visiting places like Dudleytown, Stepney Cemetery, a lot of really cool places that are kind of well known as haunted spots in Connecticut and the surrounding areas. And with each event, we'd have more and more amazing results. With each event, I was more convinced that there's something going on here beyond me just doing this as a promoter. And I became, with Nick, a paranormal investigator, to the point he finally says, "Hey, Charles, you've been producing conventions, Beatle festivals, events, music things, horror shows. Why don't we do a paranormal convention?" What's my response? Okay, why not? Mind you,
go ahead.
No, we were planning this during COVID. It's kind of one of the first events out of COVID. And we thought, all right, I said, if we draw 200 people, it'll be a nice local event. He goes, "No, there's never been one in Connecticut. It's going to draw, you watch, 500 people. Michael, it drew close to 2,000 people. And
yeah, I'm not surprised.
Connecticut's first paranormal convention, just from then on, things have just exploded to the point, like you mentioned, we do a Salem ParaCon. I wrote a book about this stuff, and the adventure continues. You ask a simple question, I give you a long answer.
Hey, I love it, and that's exactly what this show is all about, exploring the intricate details rather than the surface answer here. Something that's very interesting to me, and it's something I've crossed upon before. Some of you out there may know William Pattison, who is responsible for scribing the movie adaptation books of Friday the 13th. He's very much into the horror scene, as anybody can, ensconced, if you will. But I've always had this issue personally with being able to separate fantasy horror from, stories we hear with the paranormal and so forth. Because today, with a movie or series of movies such as Paranormal Activity, we get a lot of these sort of real life type depictions. And even Poltergeist back in the 80s was sort of giving us the same affect, which of course is done beautifully cinematically when you look at it in this respect. But when we're trying to convey some kind of truth within the paranormal, what sort of snags do you come up against if you find any sort of interruption between your love for horror and your background in that and moving forward into a field that's intended to be more translucent like the paranormal?
It's a great question. I think that the more Hollywood puts out these conjuring films, I think is the best example. But like you mentioned, Poltergeist or Paranormal Activity, the more the general public opens their eyes to the possibilities. And I think that's very, very important. I don't think there should be no, it definitely doesn't exist, because there's a lot more people who have experienced and will say, oh my gosh, yes, it does definitely exist. What I'd like for there to be is a discussion. I want there to be open-mindedness. Gosh, we could be talking about religion here, because you want that. You want open policy. You want open-mindedness. But with the paranormal, it seems that there was a time if you saw things flying around your house, or you knew there was something in the closet, you would keep that secret, or people would think these Looney Tunes. There's something wrong with the person. In the day, there were asylums set aside just for people who probably were having paranormal experiences and were believed to be just bonkers. Fortunately, that's no longer the case. Fortunately, if somebody feels they have a paranormal experience, other people want to hear about it. It's for sharing. It's for expressing. It's for community. And that paranormal community is amazing. So is Hollywood doing something weird by portraying it, the way Hollywood does? Obviously, it's glamorized, or it's dramatized, or it's made to be a little more glam than it really is. But that's okay, because again, I think it's opening up more eyes. It's like you see a rock and roll biopic. It's not exact. That's not the Beatles or Freddie Mercury or Elvis from A to Z. But it's enough of it that's correct, and it's enough of it that's getting a wider audience interested, and hopefully younger audience, as well as the elders and the people who've experienced it, and and aren't ashamed of it and aren't hiding it.
Right. Not to continue on this too much on this particular question, because you've answered it beautifully. But some of the concern I have when it comes to that depiction that Hollywood likes to give us is that as accurate as it might seem, it's built on a certain foundation. The inaccuracy comes from the narration or display of fear when it comes to the paranormal. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I haven't gotten myself into some very sticky situations when it comes to the paranormal, but majorly that's my fault. Whether I went in there with a certain intention, or I didn't, protect myself in a certain way, and I had knowledge of where I was going, I stepped foot into that pond and got wet, and therefore had to dry it out some way, shape, or form myself. Within Hollywood's depiction, again, I understand that this is an introduction for a lot of people. I think there are many avenues today. The paradigm has shifted drastically in ridicule and job loss and basic abandonment or ostracization from groups or family. In most of the cases. But do you think that this sort of fear that Hollywood likes to give us in the way of entertainment overlapped with an undercurrent of truth is what will really reach people in that sense? Again, it's sort of an arbitrary question built on what we're talking about, but it's just a curious thought I had.
So I can only speculate, of course. I don't know the answer to that, but I think that so little of this paranormal should be based on fear. So little of it is danger and malevolent. And the reason being, we're two guys, we're two good guys. Most of the people we know are good guys. There's out of 1,000 people, 999 are probably good people. There's that one out of 1,000, I don't know the ratio, who's, dangerous or violent or a prick or whatever, who's going to be a menace to society in whatever way, who will be that malevolent human. Well, I guess that will also go into the afterlife. If there's
Mm-hmm.
999 good souls, there's probably that one, I don't want to use the word demonic or evil, but maybe that one not so nice spirit. And maybe that spirit's goal is to not cross over and to torture the way it might have tortured when it was alive. What was the question? Because I hope I answered it there.
No, we're certainly on this track here. It does bring me to another
fear.
thought that I was going.
The fear of the horror movie, right?
Yeah.
So obviously, I mean, what is the news? If we turn on the news, right, at 11 p.m., what's the leading story? Is it going to be, oh, a guy rescued an old lady walking across the street? No, it's going to be, the shooting in Michigan. It's going to be something of a violent, negative, scary, controversial, that'll be the motif. I think that's why, the script that's written for the next Hollywood paranormal movie is going to be fear-based. It's going to be a scary, and that's because it sells, and that's because that's the sensational first grab of a headline.
People still do gravitate towards this more dramatic and sort of play with their own fear. And certainly there is entertainment within that. I certainly won't say anything differently, enjoying horror flicks myself. Yes, there's a certain place that you put yourself in there, but there's a safety behind it. Very interesting, this thought behind it. But yes, most people will subscribe to that. And this is what they've known. Of course, we can go into programming and so forth, but, maybe a conversation for another time. You mentioned a very interesting word, and for many, it's a formidable word that holds a lot of gravity, where I don't necessarily think it may have, in my opinion, that type of weight. And you said demonic. Now, I agree with you 100%. There are many spirits that I have come across that had this sort of dickhead mentality, wherein they were going to be this way in life, they're going to be this way in the afterlife, and perhaps this is one of the reasons they're still in the space that they are, and they do what they do the same way they did it here. Now, in my experience, there's a very different signature energetically, or a pattern that you can follow when you're dealing with an entity that was human and is just being a jerk, versus something that is non-human and comes from a very darker place, if we have the words to describe it. In your experiences, how does this add up? Is this something that you find to be somewhat true, or have you had another experience where you can say definitively the non-human entity and, it tore through my life? How does that story unravel for you?
So I've been fortunate in that I haven't come in contact with any demonic presence yet. I shouldn't say yet, because I don't want to. My read is, I don't want to bring them out. I have no reason on earth, because they're not on earth, to entice them, to get them, for any reason whatsoever. Now, having said that, the people I work with, I think, are tooled. I think they're well, who knows how well, but enough that if it comes about in one of our group sessions, one of our investigations, they either know how to battle it, avoid it, or hopefully, walk away from it. We had a situation this past weekend where we did 4 nights at the Captain Grant's Inn in Preston, Connecticut. And we called it 28 Days Haunted Revisited, because not too long ago, Netflix aired a series of shows called 28 Days Haunted, where in 3 different locations in the country, a handful of paranormal psychic investigators spent 28 days in these 3 different haunted locations, one of which was in Connecticut, about an hour from me. And Sean Austin, psychic investigator, demonologist, was one of the lead investigators on the program. We brought him along with us so that people could come to the inn, spend a few nights there, or even stay over and be part of our investigation with Sean Austin. A really great time. Sold out. We're doing it again in August. But what happened on the very last night is very intriguing, because there was one area across the street from the inn in an ancient cemetery where a few things happened. Firstly, 5-6 weeks prior to us going there, a policeman committed suicide. He shot himself on the grave of his mom. Very strong. You understand all the elements and you know all the things that can happen because of that. I was on the night that I wasn't there. Two gals with very strong psychic ability walked into the graveyard. Never been there before. With the rest of the group, with Sean, with my partner Nick, they both went in separate directions and wound up at that grave.
No kidding.
That's a wow, right? Anyway, the night that I went was last night, and I went because I didn't want to go out into a graveyard. It's it's cold. Last night it rained, but everyone said, "Oh no, you got to see this crypt. You won't believe it's like underground, and it probably squatters were there. There's old ripped up sleeping bags. There's signs of cans and stuff. You just got to see it." I go, "Okay." They're telling me I got to see it. Michael, I'm one of these guys that if we go do a haunted event and the house is supposed to be demonically possessed, I welcome the people. I have dinner with them. I give them the orientation, the introduction, and then it's good night. I'm out of there usually when anything with the DEMON word is involved. So anyway, I go there not thinking anything aside from the fact that this is going to be a cool place to visit. This is last night, mind you. We get there, and the 10-foot, 12-foot entrance to this little crypt, which people had gone to 20 minutes prior, is now completely enclosed with trees and branches sort of cross-hatched, like a group of people or a superhero or something really spent a few hours to cover up so nobody can go into this place. Wait a second. Do you hear what I'm saying?
Wait a minute. Yeah, no, how much time passed
minutes.
between when they invited you? 20 minutes. My God. Okay.
Minutes between the last group that had been there and them coming in and talking about this and saying, "Charles, you got to come out." 20 minutes. I went out with Sean Austin and a small group of people, including Nick, including his wife, Amy. And we went there and I'm like, "Okay, how do you get in?" And I'm looking at them and their mouths have dropped to the ground because this place that they just been to is now not accessible. The first thing Nick does says, "Is there somebody in there?" Thinking there's, a homeless person, whatever, who does not want us to be in here. If so, we'll leave you right now. There's no answer. There's no sign of life. We're shining flashlights in there. Sean Austin takes out his spirit box and starts trying to communicate. And the second the voice comes through saying, "We are releasing the demons," we're at it. We couldn't have moved faster away from there. But
that was the sentence, though. That was the verbiage they used.
That was the verbiage, and it was just
one
of those where the mouth drops, the heart stops, and it's like, oh my God, you're turning white and you want to get out of there. And we did. We didn't stay any longer. I think some of them returned there in an hour or two just to see if they were imagining it, if anything had changed. Nothing had changed. This was completely covered. We went back into Captain Grant's Inn, and the next morning, which would have been this morning, breakfast, we asked the owners about it. They were familiar with the crypt. They didn't believe how it would be possible that in that short of a time, it could have been covered up so carefully and so meticulously by some. I'm not going to say someone, because not one person could have done that in that short time, but something to have stopped others from visiting there. Wow, right?
Is there any possibility? Now I'm going to really go out on a limb here, no pun intended, right? Is there any possibility of sighted cryptids in the area? Because oftentimes we find that when we wander into some of these more wild areas, even if it's a graveyard that people aren't traversing through every day, some of these cryptids, especially Bigfoot, take up residence in the nearby area. Is it possible? Because either way, we're left with the conclusion that something moved all these branches to impede you from going back into this crypt within 20 minutes, regardless. Do you have any thoughts in the world of cryptids in respect to that event?
So Nick, who's very much into the cryptid world, and I gotta believe Sean is, and some of the investigators who were with us, some were everyday people, some were mediums, some were just there to have fun. Others were taken very, very seriously. Nobody brought that up, and it's a great possibility. But I feel that we would have heard branches in the background. We would have seen footprints. We would have seen any sign of something beyond us having gone there and back. And there was no hints of that, no clues whatsoever. And I'm trying to analyze it. You try to always think what's the rationale behind it, right?
Sure. Sure.
Whether it's supernatural or not. If it's supernatural, what's the supernatural explanation? If it's mortal, what's our reason? How did it happen? And I would have thought that if somebody was hidden in there or something that wanted to be covered, it's a smart thing to have done. But unless it was supernatural, there would have been no physical way to have done that work. Forget in the time that it was done and how carefully it was put, but to have done it from the inside, it had to be done from the outside. And then at what point and at what gain and at what goal? It's probably a mystery that I'll never have resolved. We will go back there. I guess we're going August 11th and 12th, return to Captain Grant's. And believe me, that's going to be the first and last place I'm going to visit, because I want to see if those branches and if it's going to still be covered the way it was. And if it's open, I want to see if that same thing happens again.
There are many people who would certainly take an initiative when it came to that. And, I think that there is some sort of grace in being very careful, especially with any sort of paranormal activity that could move objects that large. I mean, there is an inherent danger, or at least a possibility of that warning. And that's usually, even in the cryptid world, they erect different structures to let you know how far you're going into the territory. And the paranormal oftentimes does display something very similar, at least in what I've found in the people that I've talked to have echoed this. That's a very harrowing experience, mate, and certainly one that lest we wouldn't forget anytime soon. Before we go forward, because we're having a fantastic conversation here, I want to let you guys know we do have Nick Grossman in the studio. Folks.
Hello.
Welcome, Nick Grossman. How you doing, mate? Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I had some technical difficulties, but I kind of figured it out, and I appreciate the invite.
We just talked about the crypt.
Yes, the crypt. That was a lot of dark energy inside there. I'll tell you this. The funny thing is that I had no idea that there was actually an abandoned crypt on the property, and I somehow saw like a big lump in the ground, and I found it on the outskirts of the cemetery. And we had two nurses on the ghost tour go inside, and they said that smell, it smells all so familiar, like death, like embalming, like kind of an embalming type of smell. So it was pretty wild. We had a great time.
What, in your opinion, either of you, this is the question is for either of you here, what, in your opinion, would cause any type of entity, whether it be non-human or human, to stay inert in some sense in a graveyard, around a grave? Perhaps we understand that this is the final resting area of the physical body, but I mean, from our perspective, there's nothing really attractive about that decay and that place of rest, other than the beauty that it may provide in way of solace and peace. So again, why, in your opinions, do you think we find some of this incredible negative energy in graveyards?
Well, I'll tell you this, like there's a form of black magic called necromancy. And that's magic.
Did we lose him?
I wasn't sure if I froze or if he did. I'm sure the lag sometimes go back and forth, but yes, I'll let him come back on.
Technical difficulties here.
Sorry. Nope, it's okay, my friend. Not a worry. You mentioned
here, you guys.
black
it says
magic.
Everybody can hear through this whole app here. But anyway, there's a thing called necromancy, and it's a form of black magic. It's a very, very, very rare form of black magic that they use actually human remains to do their magic, and they're actually it goes even further, and there is actually a lot of people don't understand. There's actually a very dark form of Santeria too that's called Palo Mayombe, and most Santeria, they're basically like Latin American shamans. They heal their community with their magic, but with the Palo Mayombe, they actually use human remains, and when they do this type of magic, it attracts demonic entities. And we seen candles inside there, so I'm suspecting some type of occult worship was going on inside there. And it was just very wild because, it was like 2 a.m. and Charles and myself and Sean Austin and a few people on the ghost tour, I wanted to show them the crypt. I really wanted to show Charles, and we went there at like 2 a.m. And it was so bizarre because, it obviously a person put these sticks over the entrance. It was just so freaky. It straight out of a horror movie, type of vibe. And, we have a hell of a time doing these things. I got to say, me and Rosenay and myself, and, both of us are horror nerds. So it just works out perfect doing these paranormal things.
Michael,
yeah.
Nick is so well versed, and he's obviously knows all the different verses and the different words. Being a relative new student to all this, it surprises me, aside from the occult aspect of it and the human doing what they shouldn't be doing in graveyards, why spirits would want to spend time in a graveyard. Because in my mind, most spirits want to be in the places that brought them joy. Theaters,
right,
schools, homes, opera houses, places where they had great times, where they had interaction with other people, where they loved being, so that if they don't know that they have to cross over, or they're not ready to cross over, this is the places they want to be, in their homes and in these places of joy. So it doesn't, for me, it doesn't make sense why they would be in graveyards, unless it was for nefarious reasons, and unless they were being conjured by people who are alive, who are doing things to bring them back that shouldn't be.
Absolutely. Another thing. Oh, sorry. Go for it.
Nope. Go ahead.
Oh, another reason with my research is that, residual energy, when somebody goes to visit a grave of a dead loved one, they're almost summoning them to come visit too. I think that's one of the reasons. That's definitely not a demonic entity, though. But the main thing is the black magic. I mean, I myself, and I'm a magician myself of the occult. I don't do black magic, but it's part of what Charles and myself do. I mean, we produce these wild events, and there's all sorts of magical results that go on, and I mean, the phenomenon is just insane. So it's a lot of fun too.
There are a lot of people. There are a lot of people out there that do use some sort of magic, and they make a differentiation between white magic, black magic, and everything in between that spectrum. I mean, it's very vast. But there are also folks who don't do it intentionally. So, for example, if I were to sit down and work with the concept of thoughts manifest, where I'm visualizing my reality as I'm creating it, which, believe it or not, folks, a lot of high-end, top-tier people in the world, celebrities, billionaires, all these people have some sort of process that they use within thoughts manifest, creating what comes next rather than just being dealt what it is. I think that there's a very large element 100%. There within our lives. 100%. Now, when you talk about necromancy and you talk about occult activity within graveyards, yes, 100%. I have absolutely come up against this personally, where there was something on the property that shouldn't be there, and it was risen by some action, and they couldn't put it back. So guess what? Now it roams around the field, but it's like a wild bull outside of the pen. And for anybody who comes in, this thing can attach on, and it has. I've shared the same entity with at least 2 other people that I'm familiar with. One wrote 2 books on her experiences, as unfortunate as they were. But I think that's a very interesting thought, wherein many people are responsible for some of this. The thought patterns that go into bringing the memory of a loved one back. Of course, on the other side of things, yes, you can bring that person closer to you. It's almost like a call those who have had near-death experiences claim that they see some
Absolutely.
sort of beacon come out of the top of the head and actually reach out. And this is something that can be answered based on the intensity, based on the request, and so forth. So I think those are very, very interesting ideas.
100%.
Now,
actually, me and Rosenay were actually just talking about something like that a few months ago, that, why are all these historical buildings haunted? They're just buildings. And the reason is that people go in there and acknowledge the history so much that, it attracts the spirits back. I mean, we were actually just talking about that a few months back, which is interesting. Magic does come from within, though.
Oh, 100%. I mean, you're only utilizing the physical reality outside of yourself because it's already the reflection of what's within. And that's, one of those secrets, but easier said than done for a lot of people. Nonetheless, it's true. Charles mentioned that, he's been in many different countries doing some of these walkthroughs and, events having to do with the paranormal. What's one or two or three, or maybe there aren't any, consistencies that you found within visiting these different paranormal locations throughout the world?
Could you describe exactly that question a little differently? Because I didn't really quite understand it.
Certainly. When we walk into different locations here in America, especially in the Northeast, we're imbued with colonialism. We have the witch trials. We have the indigenous slaughters and so forth. So we have some idea of where some of this comes from. And behaviorally, occasionally we can pinpoint the intention behind the spirit and so forth. Now, when you go across the big pond and you go to Europe or you go to Italy or some of these countries that are obviously much older than America, there's a completely different feel and behavioral pattern that we see, at least in observance to some of this activity. Do you see any consistency between what you experience in way of paranormal activity here in America versus what you experience in paranormal activity outside of this country?
To be honest, I never really left this country. I've been to Mexico, but I think Charles could probably answer that question a bit better than I can.
Yeah,
since he's been a rambling man.
Nick, the way you've always said, there's certain states in the U.S. that tend to be more haunted. Connecticut. You always bring up, I think, Gettysburg, Savannah, places where there was a lot of war, a lot of deaths. And I think that echoes with some of the countries where there was many, many years of similar things: torture, slavery, deaths, war, poverty, but when I did all those tours, Michael and Nick, I was going as a tour guide. I was going as someone who made sure they had their rooms. I made sure the bus was air conditioned. I would bring in local hosts who knew the history of Borley Rectory, or knew the history of the Whitby Abbey, and they would tell the stories. And I would just make sure, I would be on the phone making sure that we're going to the next place. So I was a tour guide more than I was what I am now with Nick. More than now, we're paranormal investigators. I'm part of his team. So I can't honestly and sincerely answer it unless I started doing those tours to those places again now, where I would be that astute observer of the paranormal aspects of everything we did. Now, mind you, half the people who went on the tour were that. They were people like Nick and yourself who live and breathe all this stuff. But the other half were people who'd been on just cruises and trips and were looking for just an entertaining, different way of going on a trip. So I had to balance that. And I think everything I do with Nick retains that balance that I used to do on the tours, with keeping it educational, keeping it informative, teaching them and expanding the whole paranormal world. But also my goal, and Nick has also really latched onto this, is making sure people are entertained. We want them to have a good time. It's why if we go to an event like we in March, I think 10th and 11th, or 11th and 12th, we're doing something on the grounds of the Fairfield Hills Asylum in Newtown, Connecticut. It's a pop-up paranormal event. It's at the New Salem Brewery, and we started off with dinner. Everything we do starts off with dinner, an orientation, a little comedy and shtick on my part, and then I turn it over to Nick, and it gets serious and it gets informative, and we go from there. So I think that's what makes us different. I think that whole shaman and brand succeeds and has been, so much well received, that people keep coming back, because it's not just those two guys in their, in their beanies and their leather and their tattoos I just described, who are going to the places and have no sense of humor, and it's just, I think
he's like P.T. Barnum introducing like a witch doctor coming into the tent, basically. But part of our job as entertainers is making people, I always say this, making people forget for a couple hours, because this world could be a tough place sometimes, but that's Charles and I, our specialty. Yeah. Fear, fun, and facts. That's the
right.
I think you may have answered the question I'm going to ask you, and I apologize if you have within what you just said. I mean, first of all, there's no other instance where the Shaman the Showman would be more appropriate. I think you guys are aptly named, to say the very least. And again, that balance is there, and that is really important, and certainly something that flows behind the scenes with a certain rigidity that people would never be aware of. But what I want to ask you is, I see a lot of these paranormal groups going out with their leather, with their tattoos, with their beanies, with their sunglasses, all posing, in certain ways. It's all about the show. It's all about the delivery, but we're not really getting anything in respect to substance when it comes to their investigations. Yeah, we'll get the EVPs. We'll get a flighty shadow off to the left that we analyze for half an hour. I mean, these are preliminary pieces of evidence, if you will, when it comes to being so ensconced in this field. How does your crew kind of get away from that sort of image, or do you embrace it to some degree?
Well, first, let me say that I'm not putting them down. I was just being, I was just poking fun.
No, I know. No, that's an observation.
That's stereotypical, and
right.
And I was just trying to show that we're trying to be a little different and add a little levity. And I start out by saying, I was the skeptic in the group and I was the non-believer, but I've changed. I think that's very important, because you're not going to the race at 60 miles an hour to start with. It's a buildup and it's a transition in everything we do. And I think that it also, it puts, if a couple's coming and one of them's into this, like, I'm deep into this, and the other person is, I'm along for the ride, they're now both at that same comfort level because of it. So with the other groups, and I'm at a loss because I've never attended anything else that anyone's put on except going with Nick on ours. So I'm not a person who can answer that. But I think that everybody is on equal footing as far as using the equipment, as far as trying to get results, and is trying to achieve the same goal. And if you're posing doing it, or if you're a nerd doing it, I don't think it matters, as long as you're doing it with sincerity and as long as you're doing it for the good of the final end. Does that make sense, Nick?
100%. And you know what? Speaking of cool nerds, the Wizard Master from Dream Warriors was awesome. Nightmare on Elm Street. I just love that guy. But it's absolutely, it's absolutely 100% true. And a funny story about Rosenay and myself actually is one good thing about him. Rosenay is like Charles, is he's skeptic, and when he really does have an experience, he's having a paranormal experience. Like when we were driving to Long Island and I zapped him. Remember when I zapped you in the car with the energy? And he was just like, whoa, I'm really starting to believe this stuff, man. Like that. It was just wild. But I do a lot of like Kabbalah meditations and Golden Dawn and Chaos Magic, and a lot of it comes from myself. But absolutely, yeah, we just have a lot of fun with this, and we produce results. We've been very, very reluctant. Just about every event we've done has produced supernatural results. It's quite phenomenal, actually. I mean, we have a lot of great fans that follow us around now, and we make a lot of friends, and they're basically our paranormal family. But we just keep plugging along and going on where the next adventure takes us.
Michael, can
Absolutely.
you guess where we were visiting when we went to Long Island?
Don't tell me you were down in Montauk.
Is that the border of Amityville?
Oh, no, Amityville is a little bit different. It's a stone's throw away, but that's also very formidable. But I understand you really can't get too close to that home anymore. The whole neighborhood is on watch. Is that your experience?
I went right up and rang the doorbell.
Nick,
you know what? I'm a very calm guy. So the lady was actually very nice to me. And but it was funny because when we were standing outside, people were driving by and going, hoax, 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 like that, like coughing, like saying it was a hoax. It was kind of funny.
The locals
I'm definitely a believer, though. I'll tell you that much.
I think
sorry
there was
if my image is a little dark on here, but I was having some camera trouble, so if my image is a little darker,
because you're the darker force of the both of us. It makes it. Michael, what's the Montauk location?
Montauk is an entire entity in and of itself. Long story short, it's got a very sordid, uprooted history with the Algonquin Indians that were in the area. It's a magical place that still to this day, when you walk into it, those who are very sensitive can instantly feel that threshold between the rest of Long Island and Montauk. Not to mention that the alleged Montauk project occurred there, where they were working with time travel, playing with time loops, interdimensional stuff. We had extraterrestrials there, an observance. We had the Montauk chair. There's a whole story that goes into that. I'm actually working on my second documentary with this particular topic. But all this is encompassed, and I'll mention it very quickly. Believe me, but listen to what I'm gonna say, okay? Because of the nature of trauma that occurred at Camp Hero, which is where allegedly a lot of this had happened, it involved children and unwilling participants, vagrants, kids from orphanages that were taken and utilized in these, let's say, psycho experiments, okay? Because of the nature of that, I discourage ghost hunters going there with certain equipment, because there are a lot of those particular entities and souls still sort of locked within whatever time folds are still in Montauk, and you can go there and feel them. So I encourage you to go there and do your own investigation. But obviously, in this particular respect, the respect that you approach that type of thing with, know that you're going to come up against some pretty ugly looking trauma as you go into that field, and just be cautious because, again, of what the nature of activity that has happened there. But yeah, that's Montauk in a nutshell.
There's also UFOs and all sorts of stuff over there too. I'm aware of, like alien type of stuff, and science lab experiments on that island over there.
It all goes into the same fold. It's all based on the same reports that people have been still talk about to this day. Let me ask you both, and this is a question for each one of you. Being a paranormal investigator myself in years past, and of course talking to many people, I've had very impactful experiences out in the field, and there's a couple that I could name off the top of my head that maybe one's negative, maybe one isn't. Regardless, let me start with you, Charles. What has been the most impactful experience you've had with connecting with paranormal activity out in the field?
So one of our earliest visits to Dudleytown.
You got into Dudleytown? Come on, mate.
We did.
Come on now.
Pioneers.
How the hell? All right.
Pioneers.
If it's illegal, you'll tell me about it later. But I don't think you got permission from Dark Entry Forest. Okay. And if you did, I'm gonna shake your hand right now.
We found a loophole. Let's put it that way.
We since got our cease and desist letter from Dark Entry telling us
They don't waste time, bro.
But the first time we went, we walk into this. Nick gave me some tips on what to expect, and you never know what to expect, because what happens once may not happen again, and what happens, nothing may happen, or you never know, as you know when you go on expeditions. But we went there with our first of the groups. We'd gone 3 times, and there was that one who was the non-believer. I mean, I'm there to make sure everyone has a good time, no one falls. Nick is there to give the history and to really tell about these places. And two things happen. Actually, three things happened. We had a gal from New Jersey named Tracy who said she'd been on hundreds and hundreds of investigations, and that was the most she ever felt, as far as like a pressure on her chest and a headache, and just really not being able to, feel the right. And I hear that at a lot of our events, but for someone who'd been on multiples and done this all her life, and then to feel that that was something. So we go into this open field where all of a sudden, no sound of crickets, no birds. It's just like death is there. And a gal tells me, well, I guess we're not the only ones here. You saw that jogger on the other side. And what is she, Nick, what's she talking about? And she's going on. She goes, yeah, there was someone right on the other side of that, what seems to be a stream. There's probably some kind of area there. And she or he was dressed in the black sweats and had a black jacket and a black cowl, and kind of the face was black. And as she's talking, she's realizing what she's saying. And this is what a shadow she's describing. And I said, and I look at Nick, and I go, he goes, Charles, there is no place on the other side where someone could be jogging. There is no place on the other side where people could be. And we realized she saw an entity there, but that wasn't the greatest of our experiences. The one was with that one guy. He was there with his girlfriend. And I love telling the story because he's looking at his watch. What is this going to be over? He's rolling his eyes.
He wasn't having a good time.
Trying to check his phone, but his phone wasn't really working. All of a sudden, Michael, everyone is pointing to him.
How funny.
They're all pointing to this one guy. And why are you looking at me, huh? Because I'm the non-believer. And we go, no, we're looking at you because your hair is sticking straight up in the air. It's being pulled up for no reason. We're all taking pictures to show him. And he's like
a static all the way up.
Yeah. Right. Like an alien came, shot a beam down on his head, and pulled his hair straight up in the air.
Not even a balloon would make his hair stayed up that high. I mean, it was wild. There was another time, I've been doing Dudleytown for quite some time. I've been doing paranormal for over 20 years, and I first did Dudleytown probably like 2006. And one of the times I was there, this was just straight out of Alfred Hitchcock. I was walking on the trails, and probably about 300-foot radius around Dudleytown, I hear thousands of crows cawing at me. They would not come in. Now, the interesting thing about Dudleytown is it's very, very rare for you to see any type of wildlife in there. It's very bizarre. Even bugs. Yeah, I mean, I've seen maybe like one or two birds, but I've been there so many times and there was like nothing there. And it's just like a void. But it was just so interesting because obviously the crows would not come onto the terrain. They were out on the outskirts of Dudleytown, cawing and cawing and cawing. It was a perfectly sunny day. There was not a cloud in the sky. I was in the middle of the trail, and all of a sudden, this waterfall, and this is just this rainstorm that I've never experienced in my life so hard. A waterfall of rain is pouring on me. So obviously I ran. When I got out of Dudleytown, it stopped. And there was also another great, fascinating moment that I had in Dudleytown when I was actually going out of Dudleytown. I don't think I told Charles this even. I was walking down Dark Entry Road with one of my Ghost Storm members, and all of a sudden there was a big, giant, dead tree in the woods, and it literally fell. Now, when do you get to see a tree fall? It was awesome. Like, seriously, that tree was there for hundreds of years, and it fell. And it was just, why does this happen in Dudleytown, this phenomenon? It's quite a unique gem. That's the only way I could describe it. It's unlike any paranormal place that you could go. I honestly think it's some type of interdimensional phenomenon going in there. more than anything else. I mean, I think it's like a big, giant interdimensional portal.
That's always been my impression, and I liken it to the Hockomock Swamp down in the Bridgewater Triangle, which is
place, man. Dude,
one of the most haunted places.
I'll tell you, I got to tell you the story. Okay, so I went to the swamp and I went to that ledge in Freetown State Forest.
Yes.
And, you know, I like to joke around. I shouldn't joke around sometimes when I'm doing paranormal, but I like scaring people. You know, I like freaking my team members out. I just can't resist sometimes. So, you know, my friend, my former teammate was with me, Peter, and he was kind of like scared and like, so, you know, of course I was freaking him out. I was kind of talking smack to the puckwudgies. I didn't see any. All of a sudden, these rocks start getting thrown out of us out of nowheres. And it was too dangerous for us to be there. So we ran down the trail. So we go back to, there's this nice motel. I forget what it's called, but we go back over there. And, you know, he laid in his bed. I laid in my bed. I closed my eyes and I wake up to this horn-like sound going brrr. And I open my eyes and I kid you not, as real as flesh and blood, one of those puckwudgies is standing by my bed with a tree root. He's blowing it, a hollow tree root, in my ear like a horn, smiled and disappeared. And Peter was like, dude, why are you getting startled? And I said, dude, you won't even believe what just happened to me right now. And I actually have a picture of one of them that followed me back to Connecticut. I actually do. Oh yeah. I wish I could share it now, but it's, I'll send it to you. How's that?
How come you didn't give that?
Yeah, I would certainly like to see that.
I showed you. Remember the little creature in the mirror next to me? Yeah. So, but I'll never forget it. The stuff, they're real. I'm 100%.
They are real.
After what I've seen. I don't think that they're bad though. And the thing, I mean,
that's the interesting thing. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't seem. They seem to have like a sense of humor, really.
Mischievous.
Go ahead.
No, I said, were they mischievous? Is that the
mischievous?
Word?
Yes, mischievous. Yes, absolutely. But they were throwing rocks. None of the rocks hit us. None of the rocks hit us. But I mean, when rocks are being thrown, you got to get out of there. I'm sorry.
That
I've seen
honestly,
everything.
With the puckwudgies, you have to be careful because they do present themselves as tricksters. And originally, within the Native American culture, when they were on certain ground together, there was no conflict between them. That's how they were known, and it wasn't anything malevolent at that time. Of course, the story goes that the relationship soured at some point, and they saw us as more of an enemy than anything. I've also had my experiences with the puckwudgies that it only came about through just researching the damn things. And I have reason for that in respect to my experiences prior to that opened me up a little bit more. But nonetheless, the person that I was with at the time came home while I was already deterring myself from the research because I could feel the damn things in the house. Says, "What's that outside the door?" There's a little being of some sort outside the door. And I said, I know that's what it is, because these particular beings have an interdimensional capability purportedly, and within that they're able to hear certain thoughts or calls when we at least say the name. All right, you make it verbal, that makes sense, but even in thought they can still pick up on this. Yeah, they're not to be trifled with in any sort of loose way, I'll say. Now, This is fascinating. I'm absolutely enjoying the conversation to no end. Next time we get together, I'd like to talk a little bit about Barahack. If you've either been there
Never been there. That's on our list, though. Charles always asks about it, and I've never been there, so we're gonna have to. Let me ask you this: Hockomock Swamp, is there a curfew? Is there a curfew? Are you allowed there at nighttime?
As far as we understand, yes.
Yes. Okay, on the trail, it's pretty open.
Be very careful in there because, again, and it's something you might already know, but I've spoken to people that have had this experience. It's incredibly easy to get lost in there, even when you think you're on a linear path. One of the gentlemen that was interviewed for a recent documentary that the Bridgewater Triangle Paranormal Investigators had put out spent 3 nights in the Hockomock Swamp, and the stories this guy came back with will make you shiver. because it was not a good experience, and he saw a lot of the residual stuff
in the fall too. I'll tell you
gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous place, but always respecting,
magical.
And I'm talking, mostly to the people listening here, always keeping that respect when you walk into something like this, because again, these are very heavy places that you intentionally step foot in, and of course, you're taking a certain responsibility in doing so. Now, before we close out the program,
talk about Bridgewater to Charles all the time about how I love Bridgewater for all the crazy phenomenon that happens there. But Charles, that's definitely, we got to put that on the list, man.
There are so many locations to hit up. There are just a plethora of places that you can go in the Bridgewater Triangle, and a lot of them are relatively close to each other. So you hit one here, you spend a few hours, you go down the street, 15, 20 minutes, half hour, you hit another one. There's a lot to do and cover. Spending a week, 2 out there, you'll really get some good coverage. But before we end out the show here, I'd like Charles, definitely tell us a little bit about the ParaCon that happens in Connecticut and New Hampshire, and what you have coming up, both of you, in respect to the personal projects and endeavors that you pursue.
We're out of control. We do like one a month now, but the big one is May 13th and 14th. It's Connecticut. It's CT ParaCon, PARACONN.org. It's Connecticut's first paranormal convention. There's 2 in the state. We do the one in May, and it's at the Ansonia Armory. Like 80 vendors and great guests, and it's just a great event that Nick and I host. And then in November 11th and 12th, we do the Salem version of it in Salem, Mass. And there's a little combination of horror and paranormal. It's the Salem Paranormal and Horror Convention called Salem ParaCon.org. But amongst those, we've got psychic fairs coming up. We do these monthly events where we take people on paranormal investigations. And the best way to reach us is to just email CT ParaCon, and it's CTPARACONN @gmail.com. And a lot of stories we've been talking about are in the new book, True Ghost Stories of Connecticut, which you can get by going to www.paranormalconnecticut.com. And a lot of the stuff we've talked about and touched on today, including some of Nick's experiences and our Dudleytown experiences, are really recounted in there. And I appreciate you giving us the opportunity to not only tell stories and talk, but also plug a few things.
But pleasure's all mine.
That we went and did that in Dudleytown. Let's face it, Charles.
Honest to God, I did an entire video on that. People have been talking about this place for a very long time, and it recently came to light as people started exploring some of these more peripheral locations, if you will. And I put Dudleytown in that category because it's so inaccessible, and yet there's all this mystery as to why Dark Forest and Tree operates the way they do. Why in hell do most of them live outside of town rather than the purported idea that
we were basically questioned by the Men in Black when we went up there? Remember that, Charles?
Yeah, we were.
These 2 pulled up in the car, and it was like Men in Black questions. I can't.
Very surveillanced area, and obviously it's not just the townspeople, but for what reason we are left with that question. Nick, somebody had asked in the chat very quickly, do you have a channel or a Facebook page? How can we get in touch with you and maybe see some of the work that you've done?
Sure, you can look me up on Facebook, or I do have the Ghost Storm Investigations website, and I'll give it a plug. It's VAGA.paranormal.com. That's VAGA paranormal.com. And a lot of my footage, I'm filming a documentary right now, and I have so much footage, I just can't unleash it yet. But one thing about what Charles and myself do and the Ghost Storm team does is, we're very psychic team, so a lot of this activity is much less shy, and it's very easy for us to film this stuff. I mean, we did a lady in Connecticut that was possessed, and literally I have a video of a white dove just flew across the screen. It was just wild. But a lot of stuff I haven't unleashed yet. But I mean, I'm filming a documentary. We're calling it Expedition Hell.
Oh, cool! Very
but there
cool.
Is stuff on that
we'll
website.
Be looking out for that. And I would certainly ask you that when you come to a certain point where you're going to release this, let's have you back on the show to discuss and promote that as we go forward.
Charles and myself may have something cooking up as well. Just gonna not gonna say. But.
Let you know. We'll keep you informed of all the stuff we do. And if you say, "Hey, come and talk about it," we're always welcome. We're always ready and willing.
Fantastic. I really appreciate that. And both your energy is huge. Thank you so much for being here tonight with us. I think we all learned a little something and had an exploration into perhaps certain questions. I know I'm not the only one who had these questions. And I'm, again, very honored to have you both here. Now, as I close out the show, I'm going to take you off. If you have to go, I understand. I've got your number. If you can stick around for a minute, I'll say my proper goodbyes off camera. But either way, once again, it's been an honor with both of you. And I really appreciate the work that both of you do.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you letting us on.
Thank you very much, boys. I appreciate you. Oh, man. Now, see, that's a show. That's a show. And the flow in respect to what we're talking about, you're only going to get this with people who are experienced. Now, I'm not going to say that, we don't have this occasionally or even more often than not when it comes to this channel. But honest to God, what Charles and Nick do, I think, again, has a very sincere effort behind it. I think the balance between the two of their personalities and what they offer is absolutely unique. And certainly, not just because they're local, I'm going to be keeping close tabs on what they're doing and what they get into because I have a feeling that the best is yet to come. You believe that? We've been doing this shit since the 90s publicly, and yet the best is still on its way. Folks, I want to thank all of you for being here with us tonight. NAC, thank you very much for you and the Mrs. Super Chat there of $2. I very much appreciate that. We're going to Belize. It's pretty much set in stone. So we're looking at 2 weeks out there. And as that time approaches, I'll have Jared back on to give us even more details about this expedition. We have a lot of people joining us from all corners of academia in this particular effort. So it's something to look forward to. And as I mentioned, a lot of what's been going on behind the scenes has kept me from doing these interviews that, I'd like to do with you every week. But because we've been planning so diligently on a number of projects, this is what we've been left with. But I promise it'll be worth the wait. Now, speaking of wait, we have a third installment in the trilogy now of what Third Phase of Moon has been putting together on their UFO reports. Now, you also Countdown to Disclosure and the follow-up movie that came just after that. Now we have Endgame released on March 14th across all of the major platforms and streaming services. Please check this out. I've watched it in the screening room. It's absolutely incredible and a very formidable conclusion in respect to the trilogy. Again, Third Phase of Moon has put a lot of heart and soul into this along with the participants. I implore you to go and check this out when it drops. In the meantime, folks, we'll be back next week. I'm going to keep you on. We're not going down to Belize until April. So I'll continue to do these interviews. Like, as I said, I have some SSP people coming on, Secret Space Program folks. I have some people who were involved in Montauk. However nebulous these memories end up being, still something there to discuss. So until next time, stay intrepid, stay explorative, and continue to traverse this nebulous field we're all a part of in search of the truth. Because, goddammit, I'll be there till the very end. Ciao. Also, thank you, Cashew Guzenheit, for dropping all those awesome links, not only but all through the show. Every time you're here, which is every time. Thank you. Special thank you to Cashew Guzenheit and all my moderators.